Peter Yee.
And I'm Monica Agrawal.
We're here today to talk about artificial intelligence in medicine and related topics. Today, we wanted to talk about large language models. And Monica, if you could maybe just briefly explain what large language models are.
Yeah, so language modeling is something that's kind of existed for quite a while. And essentially, what language modeling is trying to do is like it's a machine learning method to try to, for lack of it, kind of learn how to mimic and generate plausible language and kind of understand like the distribution of language. And what large language models are doing is this at a huge scale. And essentially, they do that by ingesting huge amounts of data from, for example, the internet to kind of understand patterns in language.
Okay. And so I guess one of the more popular kind of large language models out there seems to be ChatGPT. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think ChatGPT is the one that really launched large language models into sort of like the public ether. But there's kind of many and kind of where you decide the cutoff is for when something is large is kind of hard to define. But there have been models that are quite big for, 4 to 5 years now.
Okay.
But they really entered public consciousness with ChatGPT last year.
Okay. Maybe if we could maybe dive a little bit deeper into how exactly a large language model works. Can you explain a little bit about what the process is in terms of how they work?
Yeah, so they can be trained in different ways, but I'll kind of describe one of the ways that these models are often being trained. So they basically, in order to learn sort of these patterns in language, they need to have data to work off of. So one common sort of language model is an autoregressive language model, and what that means is the model is trained to predict the next word in a sentence. So what you can imagine, and this is like this is the most major way these language models are trained. So if you think about something that's on the scale of GPT, it's trained on a huge fraction of the internet and essentially to predict the next word in a passage. So you can imagine taking, a paragraph off Wikipedia, hiding the last word in there and asking, and basically training a model to predict what should the next word of the passage be? And by predicting the next word over and over again, you now are kind of generating text. So this is called autoregressive training. And that's sort of the first major way these language models are trained. And now there have been, other kind of additions on top of that. So one major one is giving it examples of input and output. So maybe example questions and training it to come up with the example outputs. And more recently, these models have been relying on human preference feedback. So, the model generates two pieces as like plausible responses, and then humans are asked which one do they like better. And this sort of human preference has been shown to really improve the outputs of these models.
Okay. So does a large language model then kind of use all three ways to come out with whatever you're asking it to do?
So I think most of the modern ones that we're seeing today usually use some combination of the three. So you can have models that only do like the first one, for example. But I would say like things like ChatGPT are doing all three.
Okay, great. And I guess that's what makes it so useful is that it's able to do all three methods to come up with what you're asking it to do.
Yeah, so I think essentially, trained on only completing the sentence, can get something that learns how to mimic language, but it's not always kind of useful in the way that a human would like. So kind of giving it more directed examples of how to act can really improve performance.
Okay. And does it get better and better as it goes through more of the data?
So yeah, they essentially really benefit from having a lot of data to be training on. So there's different papers out there on how much better they can do with more data. But basically, the more that they are able to sort of take in terms of examples, kind of the wider variety and diversity of things that they can sort of generate.